Hello everybody and welcome back to the platform. It is Saturday, which means that it's time for a brand new content report. Let's take a look at the development progress we've made this week for our video games. And as always, remember that these development videos are available to you in full uncut versions on the conceptbay.net platform. This week we made some progress on the Dream Team Theater project, as well as Child of Ether, and we've got an interesting marketing-related tutorial series. So let's go ahead and take a look.
See you walking past me down
This week was all about finishing up with the existing animations we made for the weapon, mainly the reloading animation and the charging animation. If you've watched the previous videos, you've seen that the charging animation is actually a three-part piece. The first animation, the one that gets the hand on the crank, the second one is the spinning loop, and the third one is the process of taking the hand off the crank and returning to the default base pose. We've also handled the little mechanic that slows down the charging animation the further you charge it along, which artificially gives it that tension feel, as if you're actually battling some mechanisms of the weapon. And following that, the final animation that we had in store, which had to be programmed, is the reloading animation. Speed and transition could still use a little work, but I'm happy with the results so far. Next up, we had addressed the problem of the drop hatch not quite looking right with its emissive map and the diffuse map not quite occupying the same space, and we solved this by implementing a secondary set of UV data, which means that now the material actually uses a separate UV map for the emissive map and a totally separate one for the base texture. In another episode, we make a return to Substance Painter in order to flesh out the look of brass. It really did not look like brass at all in Godot, so I had to really taper off the effects of height maps and normal maps to get the brass look smoother, more reflective, and work well with the Godot engine's material workflow. In order to get the reflections looking just right, we ended up implementing the reflections probe into our level and then playing around with the properties and dialing in the textures just right to get the brass to actually look like brass. Now, it still shows up a little bit dark here, and I'm gonna have to increase the value of the brass color in Substance, but we're actually getting an infinitely better result than I had before we have made our changes. The brass still looks a little bit dark. I'm probably gonna have to get the color more into the yellow range, maybe something very light orangish just to get it looking just right, but we have made a pretty good amount of progress, especially those reflections on the weapon from the environment. Just to switch gears a little bit, I also wanted to try to play around with the signage in the game of various sections. The game, after all, takes place in an underground reality show, and many different sections of this one underground building, are repurposed to serve different needs. And to stick to the aesthetic of the game, we try to find the fonts that generally resonate with the 40s signage style. And because the game is gonna have a lot of these signs, I really can't afford to be using any lights to simulate this effect. Instead, we actually use a whole bunch of trickery to get these light up neon sign effects without the use of any lights whatsoever. That's it for Dream Team Theater. Let's move on to the next bit of content. Some of you may already be familiar with this one. This is the Live News Update System tutorial for Godot Engine games. It's a system that basically fetches news from an online platform and inserts it right into your game, which means that you could have a total of 5 or 10 games that you've created over the course of many years, and those games will still fetch the most up-to-date news and display them to the users who are playing those games. This tutorial covers the creation of 5 different news delivery templates, starting with the basic text only, followed by a news tabloid that loads not only text but also an image that belongs to that piece of news. After which we develop a multi-news tabloid, which is now capable of displaying multiple pieces of news and multiple images, one after another, with a little bit of control, as well as the call to action button, which is supposed to make the transition from the game to the destination content you'd like to be consumed or purchased or checked out as short and simple and straightforward as possible. Essentially, this button makes the operating system open up a web browser with the link destination of where you want the gamers or viewers to end up in. We end up finalizing the tutorial with a fancy 3-dimensional news delivery system that essentially displays your news right on a 3D object, which also includes a couple of 3D buttons which you can click on to cycle through the news, and these work at whatever angle you decide to place your 3D object at. And as a little bonus, we have offset the news counter to the bottom left corner in a tiny little mini screen. I'm also considering on expanding the web side of this particular tutorial by teaching you how to create a web-based dashboard that allows you to quickly post new articles of news, including new thumbnails, to the website, which means that all of the games will automatically pick up on that news and display them to the users. Until then, let's move on to the next bit of content. My father is a scriptwriter, and I am a son of a storyteller. And because of that, since my childhood, I've been exposed to the concepts of proper storytelling and scriptwriting. And I still think that that, to this day, is probably my biggest strength when it comes to game development. I'm not a good programmer by any means, and, my animation skills are okay. I get by with what I can do, and I can generally find my way around to implementing some interesting mechanic with what I know. But chances are my games won't really offer anything unique or phenomenal or revolutionary in terms of mechanics. So I don't expect to be a pillar of discovery that moves the technology of game development forward. I gotta play to my strengths, and my strengths right now would probably be storytelling. It is for that reason I expect Child of Ether is actually going to offer a lot of stories. Quests and tales, missions and background history, character arcs, transformations, problems and dilemmas they will have to face in this world. And because I expect this game to be very story rich, I thought it would be best to invest my time right now into the creation of a quest building or quest execution system that will make the job of implementing stories and quests and missions as easy, straightforward and fast as possible. So this week for the Child of Ether project, I have been doing just that. In front of you, you can see a dashboard that is actually built into the game itself. You will see me create this node-based system that allows you to set up chains of events in the quest progression. This can range from dialogue boxes from the NPCs, multiple responses from the user to take the conversation in different branching paths, which could result in different rewards granted to the player, as well as the ability to grant inventory items and quest items, as well as checking if the player's inventory contains certain items or quest items to determine whether or not the quest can progress forward. And who knows, perhaps because this dashboard is built right into the game, maybe I will be able to implement it as a permanent part of the game, where you can create custom quests as community-made content. Godot's Engine graphical user interface library is really making this job fairly easy. And instead of having to spend a lot of time developing the buttons and windows and text input boxes, I can just spend all of my time towards the logic of this toolset. The idea behind it is that I'll be able to load up any quest, edit it, add new nodes, add new branching paths, and then save it to the local storage and have the game pick it up automatically when I play it. This is a pretty hefty tool, and you really don't want to be creating this unless you're planning on using it quite generously throughout your entire project. It's simply the economy of scale. There's no sense in contributing time into such a tool unless you use this tool extensively enough for it to save more time than it took to develop it. And as I said before, my strengths lie more in storytelling, so my games should offer an abundance of stories. Thus, if this tool allows me to rapidly create and deploy these stories into my game without me having to write any extra code, this tool in my context will make more sense. That is all I have for this week in terms of content. If you enjoyed this and if you are interested in seeing how I create these games, theconceptbait.net is the place to support me in my projects and in return get the full unedited content of how I create these games. We will meet again next Saturday during the next week's content report, and until then, I bid you farewell.